I came home after 4 days, and the only bridge to my house was chained shut, drilled into the concrete, with the HOA's logo stamped on it like they'd conquered my land. Then I found the hidden cameras, the forged boundary maps, and a fake safety order signed by an engineer who'd lost his license for fraud. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an HOA dispute. This was a hostile takeover, and they had no idea who they'd just started a war with. There's a certain kind of quiet in the Montana mountains that most people never hear in their entire lives. It isn't silence. No, silence is empty. This is different. This is the sound of the world settling, pine needles whispering high above the river, the low rumble of water sliding over stone, the gentle groan of old timber under the morning cold. That quiet, that was home. It was the reason I bought this land, the reason I built on it with my own hands. One board, one paycheck, one long stubborn year at a time. And for 18 years, no one bothered me. No one questioned my bridge. No one tried to stake a claim to the ground beneath my boots. Until that morning. I'd been gone 4 days, just 4, visiting an old buddy, stocking up supplies, enjoying the kind of conversation you can only have with someone who knew you before your beard turned gray. When I drove back along the dirt road and stepped out of my truck, the air felt wrong. Cold, sharp, metallic. A smell you never want near concrete. Fresh cut steel. I walked forward slowly, boots cracking through the frost. And then I saw them. Chains. Thick black chains pulled tight across the mouth of my bridge, bolted straight into the concrete slab like someone had claimed it in the dead of night. A bright aluminum sign hung from the center. HOA property. Access revoked. My breath left me. Not in fear, not in panic, in disbelief. I wasn't part of an HOA. Never had been, never would be. My land sat 2 miles north of the nearest development, far from their neatly trimmed lawns and golf carts. And yet, here they were, planting their flag like they'd discovered a new continent. I crouched beside the chains, touched the bolt head, still warm. Meaning, whoever did this hadn't been gone long. I scanned the tree line on instinct. Years alone teach you to look for what doesn't belong. That's when the glint caught my eye, a tiny reflection from inside a patch of brush. I pushed the branch aside. A camera, a little black square aimed directly at my bridge, wired into a battery pack hidden under dead leaves. That was when the quiet changed. It didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt watched. I stood up, jaw tight, and stared at the river flowing quietly beneath the blocked path. "This isn't a mistake," I said under my breath. "This is a move." My truck couldn't cross, not with the chains pulled so tight they could stop a tank. So I backed up the dirt road, parked on the far side, and took the long trail through the woods. It wasn't a hard hike, but the weight of anger made every step heavier. By the time I reached my porch, the Montana air felt thinner, like the land itself knew something was wrong. Inside, I hung up my coat, kicked off the cold, and poured a cup of coffee. The house felt different, not unsafe, but disturbed, as if someone had knocked something out of place deep in its bones. On the kitchen table sat the envelope I'd found earlier in my mailbox, plain, cheap, no stamp, no courtesy, just a printed accusation. Boundary reassessment, unauthorized land usage, payment required. I'd seen bad paperwork before, but this one read like a threat written by someone who'd never met a real lawyer in their life. Still, I'm a reasonable man. I believe in starting with the truth before swinging at the lies. I dialed the number printed at the bottom. It rang only twice. Riverside Tranquility Homeowners Association. This is Karen speaking. I closed my eyes for half a second. Of course her name was Karen. "Ma'am," I said, "my name is Garrett Kane. I received a notice stating my bridge encroaches on HOA land. I'm calling to clear up what I'm sure is a misunderstanding." Her voice sharpened instantly. "There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Kane. According to our updated boundary assessment, your structure is partially within Riverside Tranquility jurisdiction." I glanced out the window at the river, the same river that had marked my property line since the day I bought the place. "My bridge is on my land," I said. "Surveyed, stamped, inspected, and approved. Your jurisdiction ends 2 miles south." A pause, but not the kind where someone considers what you're saying, the kind where they prepare something smug. "Our maps supersede outdated documents," she replied. If you wish to dispute the charges, you may do so through the appropriate legal channels, but the board has voted. The fees stand. Let me see those maps, I said. We don't release internal assessments to non-members. Non-members, meaning me, meaning the man whose bridge they had just chained shut. I felt something settle in me then, slow, heavy, inevitable. The first click of a storm door caught in the wind. All right, I said quietly. If that's the game you want to play, then we'll play. Her voice brightened like she was offering a coupon at a grocery store. Payment is due within 10 days. Have a wonderful afternoon. And she hung up. Just like that. No conversation, no courtesy, no proof, only entitlement, and the echo of a woman who had no idea what kind of fight she had just stepped into. I've learned something over the years. When people lie, they rarely do it cleanly. There's always a wrinkle, a smudge, a corner peeling up where the truth tries to escape. The HOA's letter had plenty of peeling corners. I brought the papers to my desk, sat in the old leather chair that had outlived 2 states and a wildfire, and laid everything out flat. The boundary reassessment was a joke, missing every legal requirement a real survey needs. But the attached map, that was the part that made the coffee in my stomach go sour. Glossy print, thick red X over my bridge. Property lines bent like someone drew them during a seizure. A faint gray caption reading, HOA Zone, Revised Expansion Overlay. Expansion, there was that word again. But there was something stranger. The coordinate grid didn't match rural mapping standards. The watermark was stretched. The survey seal, wrong shape entirely. Someone hadn't just made a mistake. They had fabricated evidence. I sat back and exhaled through my teeth. And then another thought hit me. The camera. In the moment I found it earlier, my brain was too busy processing the shock of the chain bridge, the audacity of the sign, the sense of violation. I hadn't looked at the ground. I'd been too focused on that glinting lens tucked in the brush. But now I wanted evidence. So I grabbed my coat, stepped outside, and followed the trail down to where the little device had been hiding. The forest was quiet. Quiet in a way that means every creature within 50 yards is listening. I crouched, reached under the dead leaves, and pulled the camera free. Weatherproof, night vision, motion triggered. Someone hadn't just wanted to see the bridge. They wanted to see me at the bridge. I turned the camera over in my hand, feeling its cold weight. That's when I finally looked down. Fresh footprints, boot prints, size 10 or 11, deep tread. Someone heavier than me, or at least not trying to walk lightly. I followed the impressions with my eyes. They led from the roadside straight to the brush where the camera had been nestled. The dirt was still damp, the edges of the prints still sharp. Whoever planted the device had done it recently. Hours ago. Maybe less. A slow burn started behind my ribs. Not panic, not rage. Resolve. Cold, steady, old man resolve. I pocketed the camera and stood up, looking across the valley. The roofs of Riverside Tranquility gleamed in the distance. Same color, same angles, same personality. Little toy boxes stacked in rows. Somewhere among them was a person who thought they could push a man off his own land with nothing more than paper lies and a padlock. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I turned away from the river and climbed the trail back home. The air felt heavier now, as if the valley itself was bracing for something. Inside the house, I set the forged map on the table, placed the camera beside it, and pulled the SD card out with a quiet click. Whatever was on this thing could be the difference between suspicion and proof. But before I checked it, the caption at the bottom of the map caught my eye again. Expansion overlay. Overlay, meaning there was another document this was based on. Probably something internal. Probably something they didn't want outsiders seeing. Probably something stupid enough that someone had leaked it somewhere on the internet. Because HOA boards love making PDFs they shouldn't. I powered on my computer, cracked my knuckles, and muttered, "Let's see exactly what you idiots are planning to lay over my land." And as the screen lit my desk in cold blue, the war officially began. There's a funny thing about homeowner associations. They love paperwork. They love meetings. They love reports. And most of all, they love saving everything in PDF form, which also means they love leaking things by accident. I typed Riverside Tranquility HOA overlay expansion into the search bar, half expecting nothing more than a bunch of gardening newsletters and passive-aggressive meeting notes. But 3 links down, I found something that made my eyebrows pull together. A file on a community cloud drive, public, no password, just sitting there like a trap someone forgot to hide. Riverside Tranquility Phase 2, planning draft to PDF draft, meaning not final, meaning someone uploaded it early, meaning someone out there had no idea what they'd just given me. I clicked. The document opened in all its self-important glory, 23 pages of corporate fonts, stock photos of smiling families, and phrases like future community integration corridor, river adjacency optimization, shared access improvement initiative. You could smell the consultants through the screen. I scrolled down to the maps, and there it was. My land, my river bend, my bridge, sitting directly across a dashed red arrow labeled Preferred Northern Access Route, Phase 2. I leaned in closer, jaw tightening. The arrow pointed straight to the site of my bridge, not near it, not adjacent, straight to it. The plan notes read, current conditions, no established community access route, potential obstacle, private bridge owned by non-member landholder. Obstacle, that's what I was to them. And below that, recommendation, jurisdiction claim via boundary reassessment to secure northern ingress. There it was, the smoking gun. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an overreach. This wasn't some overeager HOA president misreading a map. This was a strategy. They had laid it out like a blueprint for a burglary. I scrolled further. A small section near the bottom had been highlighted, maybe by the last person who handled the file. Projected benefits of northern access, reduced drive time for residents. Emergency response shortcuts. Connection to regional road system. Expansion viability of lots 51 to 66. Lots 51 to 66. New homes, new money. And to build them, they needed an entrance they could never afford to construct themselves, but one that already existed on my land, my bridge. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking under the shift of my weight. Well, I muttered, there's your motive. The file had dates, signatures, drafts, revision history. These weren't Karen's pet fantasies. This was a coordinated HOA initiative. And right there in the revision notes, legal counsel recommends asserting claim over riparian buffer zone for jurisdiction expansion. Riparian, meaning riverbank, meaning the thin strip of unassigned buffer land between my property and theirs, meaning they were counting on confusion. But what they didn't know was this. I built my bridge with certified boundaries. I walked the land with surveyors. I pored over plat maps until I could draw them from memory. They picked the worst possible landowner to target, a man who knew the paperwork better than they did. I downloaded the entire Phase 2 file, saved it twice, and copied it to an external drive. Then I printed the important pages and laid them out on my desk beside the forged HOA map. 2 plans side by side, one fabricated, one leaked. Funny thing, they matched just enough to incriminate everyone involved. They want access, I whispered, and they think they'll take it. Well, no, not from me. Not today, not ever. I reached for my phone and dialed my lawyer in Missoula. Mitchell, I said when he answered. We've got ourselves a project. I woke before sunrise the next morning with a knot in my stomach. Not fear, just the instinct a man earns after enough years dealing with people who smile while hiding the knife behind their back. I brewed a cup of coffee, stepped outside, and followed the trail toward the river. The air was colder than usual, sharp enough to sting, the kind of cold that keeps a man awake even when he wishes this was all just a bad dream. When the trees finally opened and the bridge came into view, I stopped dead in my tracks. It wasn't just the chains anymore. They had escalated. A full steel barricade stood across the mouth of my bridge. 4-inch posts drilled deep into the concrete, braced with galvanized bars, wrapped 3 times with a heavy industrial chain, all locked with a padlock the size of a baby's fist. A brand new sign dangled in the middle. Emergency safety closure, structural instability detected. Authorized by engineer Leonard Briggs. Briggs, a name that meant nothing then. But soon I'd learn he wasn't an engineer at all. Not anymore, not legally. But in that moment, he was the man whose forged signature had cut me off from the rest of the world. I set my coffee on a rock and stepped closer, laying my palm on the steel. It was freezing, cold enough to bite my skin, the kind of cold that said this barricade had been installed under cover of darkness, left to sit through the long night like a sentinel, with no pulse, no warmth, no humanity, just a declaration. You're not going anywhere. A slow, steady breath pushed out of me. Not anger, not yet, but a kind of quiet disbelief that sinks deep and stays heavy. This wasn't vandalism. This was a deliberate blockade, a calculated move meant to isolate me, trap me on my own land, make me bend. But I don't bend. Not for people. And sure as hell not for paperwork bullies with clipboards. I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff's office. Deputy Thurman arrived 25 minutes later. A young man, polite, the kind who still believes disputes can be solved with reason and calm conversation. He took one look at the barricade and let out a low whistle. "That yours?" he asked. "No," I said, "but everything behind it is." I handed him my paperwork. Permits, county surveys, engineering approvals, the whole stack. He read through them, nodding slowly. "Well, this all looks solid. You did everything by the book." "Then cut the chain," I said. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. "I can't do that, Mr. Kane." "Why not? This is my bridge on my land." He pointed at the sign. "Because we received that order too, emergency safety closure. If I cut this and that bridge collapses, the liability comes down on the department." "You really think my bridge is unstable?" "That's not the issue," he said gently. "The issue is, a certified engineer signed that closure." I almost laughed. Certified? Right. Later, I'd learned Briggs had lost his license 5 years ago for falsifying soil reports. But for now, all Deputy Thurman had to go on was a printed piece of paper with a forged stamp. He looked genuinely conflicted. "File for an injunction," he said softly. "It's your best route. Until then, my hands are tied." I nodded. It wasn't his fault. He'd been handed a stack of lies dressed up as authority. He headed back to his cruiser. I didn't. I took the long way home, the steep game trail crawling up the backside of my property, roots slick from frost, rocks hidden under old leaves. Halfway up, my boot slipped. My knee slammed into a jagged stone so hard stars burst behind my eyes. I cursed out loud. The ground, the HOA, the universe, then pushed myself upright and limped the rest of the way. By the time my porch came into view, the pain had turned into a slow, angry throb. That throbbing would later become part of my medical file, documented injury, another nail in the HOA's coffin. I looked back toward the river. Through the trees, I could just make out the silver barricade glinting like a taunt in the rising sun. They hadn't just blocked my bridge, they had endangered my life, and that crossed a line. I took a deep breath, slow, steady, controlled. Then I said what I knew to be true. It's time to fight back. What I didn't know yet was just how far they were willing to go, or how much evidence they had already left for me to use against them. Pain has a strange way of sharpening the mind. By the time I limped into my living room and lowered myself into a chair, my knee had swollen enough to press against the denim of my jeans. The throbbing wasn't subtle. It was the deep, deliberate kind that pulses with each heartbeat, reminding you of the moment everything went wrong. This time, though, the pain wasn't just inconvenience, it was evidence. I grabbed my truck keys, walked the long trail back around the backside of my property, slow, steady, one careful step at a time, and finally reached the road where my truck still sat. Every step hurt, but every step also hardened something inside me. If Karen wanted a paper war, she'd get one, and she'd lose. At the clinic in town, the nurse asked how I'd hurt myself. I didn't sugarcoat it. Slipped on a frost-covered game trail because my only legal access home was blocked by an illegal barricade. The doctor documented everything: contusion, swelling, range of motion, restriction. He asked if I wanted x-rays. I said yes. It never hurts to have too much proof. I left with a brace, 2 prescriptions, and a stack of medical records thick enough to make any lawyer smile. Back in the truck, I dialed the number that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind since the moment I saw that barricade. Mitchell Harper, attorney, smart, steady, ruthless when necessary. He answered on the second ring. "Garrett, been a while." "Wish this was a friendly call," I said. "I'm guessing it's not. What happened?" I laid everything out. The chains, the forged safety order, the fake engineer, the new barricade, my fall, my injury. But when I told him about the expansion map I'd found, the one marking my bridge as a preferred access corridor, Mitchell's tone changed. "Send all of it. Photos, maps, medical records, and Garrett." "Yeah?" "Don't talk to them. Not until we move first." I hung up, drove straight to Bozeman, and walked into the GPS surveying office, one of the only places in the state capable of producing sub-inch accuracy legal boundary scans. The technician recognized me immediately. "You're the guy who built that concrete span over Black Row, right?" "That's me." "Still standing strong?" "It is. The only problem is a group of neighbors who say it isn't." He chuckled under his breath. "That sounds like a problem they made up." "I'm starting to think so too." I booked the earliest field survey, 2 days out. They'd scan the whole property line, riverbank, bridge piers, the works. A legal certified map that nobody, not even an HOA with a taste for fiction, could argue with. When I got home, I limped into my office, braced myself in the chair, and laid everything out across my desk. Medical forms, forged maps, photos of the barricade, the original HOA threat letter, and the SD card from the hidden camera I'd pulled off the railing. I slid the card into my computer. The files loaded slow, one after another. Short clips, motion-triggered, mostly empty frames of river and wind. But two caught my attention. The first wasn't clear, but it told me plenty. The camera had been switched on before it was fully mounted. For a few seconds the lens swung wildly, catching quick flashes of a reflective vest, a gloved hand, and the edge of a tool pouch. No face, never that, but enough to prove someone had been on my land deliberately setting it up. Even better, I heard a voice, low, muffled. "Hold it steady, right here." The second clip showed silhouettes installing the barricade, blurry shapes moving with purpose, hauling metal, tightening chains. Enough to identify tools, enough to match footwear tread later, enough to show intent. I leaned back slowly, exhaling through my nose. This wasn't some petty HOA complaint about grass length or mailbox color. This was trespassing, criminal interference, fraud, and a coordinated attempt to force access across my land. They thought I'd fold. They thought an older man living alone near a river would rather comply than fight. They thought wrong. I organized every document, every photo, every time-stamped file into a single binder, my case, my ammunition. Then I closed the cover, set it gently on the desk, and let the weight settle into my hands. Tomorrow, the counterattack would begin. Tonight, I prepared. War wasn't coming. It was already here. 2 days passed without a knock, without a phone call, without a fresh envelope stuffed with bad ideas. That alone made me suspicious. Silence, I've learned, is never peace. It's preparation. And sure enough, on the morning the survey team was set to arrive, a new envelope showed up in my mailbox. Not from the HOA this time. No smug logo, no cheap printer ink. This one came from the Montana Department of Environmental Quality. That got my attention. I tore it open right there on the porch, knees still stiff, coffee still hot, breath fogging in the cold air. The letter was polite in that uniquely bureaucratic way. Courteous font, firm language. It said, "A complaint has been filed alleging that support columns of your bridge may obstruct seasonal aquatic migration patterns." Translation: someone complained about fish. Someone meaning the HOA. Someone meaning Karen. I kept reading. An environmental field team will conduct a preliminary inspection within 10 business days. Please ensure access to the site. Non-compliance may result in further action. I lowered the letter. "Of course," I muttered. "When land grabs fail, bring in the salmon." I wasn't worried about my bridge. It was designed with flow rates, sediment patterns, and wildlife in mind. But I wasn't about to trust a state team walking in blind to an HOA manufactured narrative. So I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Montana State University, Department of Aquatic Biology. A receptionist picked up. "Is Professor Claire Mendoza available?" There was a pause. Then a familiar voice came on. "This is Claire." "It's Garrett Kane," I said. from Black Row River. She didn't respond for a moment. What's going on? She finally asked. I explained. The fake land claim, the forged maps, the barricade, the injury, and now the new accusation that my bridge was somehow a threat to fish. Claire let out a long, unimpressed breath. Garrett, the span of that river beneath your bridge has one of the most stable flow pockets in the county. Who filed the complaint? Anonymous. Oh, please, she snapped. It's the HOA, isn't it? I'd bet my truck on it. All right, she said. I'll come out. You sure? You're telling me someone's falsely weaponizing aquatic law against you. Her tone hardened. That's my field. I'm not letting bad science or bad neighbors win. 2 days later, she arrived in a dusty university truck with 2 grad students and enough equipment to run a full-scale field study. Waders, underwater cameras, sonar, sediment kits, temperature sensors, GPS logs, the works. I met them at the trailhead, limping slightly, and led them to the river. When Claire stood beneath the bridge, she looked over the concrete supports, the current flow, the shadow the span cast across the water. Her grad students were already placing cameras beneath the pilings. After 20 minutes of silence, she turned to me. You said they claimed you were blocking migration? That's the story. Well, she said, almost laughing, your bridge does the opposite. I raised an eyebrow. How so? She pointed toward the underside of the structure. See the way the current slows here? The bridge creates small refuge pockets, microhabitats. Juveniles use that as resting zones during seasonal movement. And the shade keeps the water temperature down. That's critical for survival in late summer. So it helps the fish? It helps the fish, she said. If anything, tearing this bridge down would do more harm. That felt good to hear. Really good, but it got better. While her team worked, one of the grad students walked over looking troubled. You might want to see this, he said. He led me 50 yards downriver, onto the HOA side. I saw it immediately. Fresh tree stumps, not old, not naturally fallen, cut, clean, deliberate. What the hell? I asked. The student pointed with a measuring stick. Someone's been clearing riparian vegetation. Probably to improve their view. Riparian zones are protected by both county and state law. Is that legal? I asked, but I already knew the answer. No, the student said, and cutting this close to the water increases sediment runoff. Bad for eggs, bad for juveniles, bad for everything. I felt anger rise in my chest again, this time hotter, steadier. The HOA had accused my bridge of harming wildlife, while they were illegally cutting riverside trees for better picnic views. Hypocrisy didn't even begin to cover it. Claire documented everything: GPS coordinates, drone footage, sediment samples, stump cores, erosion markers. By the time they left, she handed me a preliminary written statement. Her conclusion was blunt. No obstruction detected. Bridge supports beneficial microhabitats. Observed vegetation removal on opposite bank may indicate environmental violations by adjacent property owners. I shook her hand. Claire, you just handed me dynamite. She smiled. No, I handed you the truth. Use it. As their truck drove off, I looked back at the river, at my bridge standing solid and calm, and at the HOA's carved-up riverbank. They wanted to use science as a weapon. Fine. But they forgot something important. Science fights back. And this time, it was fighting for me. 3 days passed after Claire's visit, and not a single HOA letter showed up in my mailbox. No threats, no accusations, no new fabricated maps. Just silence. And silence from people like Karen is never peace. Silence means planning. So, I prepared. I installed 2 new trail cameras. One angled toward the approach to the bridge, another hidden deep in the brush across the river. IR, night vision, motion triggered, and tied to a backup SD card buried in a waterproof pipe 6 feet away. If the HOA wanted to escalate, I would be ready. On the 4th morning, before sunrise, something woke me. Not a noise, a feeling. A tension in the air a man learns to respect after 60 years of storms, engines, and human nature. I got up, slipped into my boots, put on my coat, and followed the path to the river. Halfway down, I heard it, metal on metal, sharp, intentional, not the river, not the wind, not an accident. I stepped through the trees and froze. Two men in reflective vests were crouched at the base of my bridge. One wielded a socket wrench. The other was using a cordless drill to loosen the guardrail bolts. And parked behind them was a white van painted with blue letters. Riverside Tranquility Maintenance Division. A fake division for a fake justification behind a very real crime. I didn't shout. I raised my phone, hit record, and walked out of the tree line like a man already holding the winning hand. "Morning, boys." The one with the drill jerked upright. The other stopped mid-turn, wrench frozen in his hand. We're with the HOA, the first man stammered. "We've been contracted to begin structural removal of this." "This," I cut in, stepping closer, "is my bridge on my land, and what you're doing is felony property damage." He swallowed hard. We have authority." "From who?" He hesitated, then pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper. A memo, signed by Karen B. Not notarized, not stamped, not legal in any universe. When I kept filming, panic flickered across both their faces. "You boys realize this could put you in prison, right?" The shorter one's voice cracked. "We're just doing what she told us." I dialed the sheriff's office. 911, what's your emergency?" "No emergency," I said evenly. "I just have two individuals attempting to dismantle certified infrastructure on private property, and I have full video." "Deputies are en route." The men didn't run, but the real crack came 30 seconds later. The taller man exhaled shakily, shoulders collapsing inward. Then he slowly held out his phone toward me. "Look, just so you know, we didn't come up with this." On the screen was a text thread from a number saved as Karen B, HOA, and the messages were unmistakable. "Is it done yet? Make sure you remove the main support bolts so the structure fails completely. Cash is in the usual spot." Another bubble. "Don't let him see anything. Do it before sunrise." And finally, "If the sheriff asks, say it's HOA property. Stick to that." I didn't speak. I just let the camera roll. When the deputies arrived, the men didn't argue. They didn't deny a thing. They handed over the memo. They handed over their tools. And the phone, the real treasure, went straight into Deputy Thurman's evidence bag. Thurman looked at me, jaw tight, eyes sharp. "This is a whole different level." "No," I said quietly. "This is exactly what they've been aiming for." He nodded grimly. "We're placing them under arrest for trespassing and attempted destruction of private infrastructure." As the men were led to the cruiser, the shorter one broke. "She paid us to do it. Cash. She said the bridge was illegal and she needed it gone before the county inspector came." Thurman turned back to me. "Garrett, between those texts and your video, this is going to explode." "Oh, I know. You planning to sue?" "Planning?" I said. "Deputy, I've already started." He let out a low whistle. "Well, good luck. Though it looks like luck won't be the deciding factor here." When they drove away, leaving tire tracks carved deep into the frosted dirt, I stood alone at the entrance to my bridge. The sun was rising behind me, turning the river gold. A new day. A turning point. I looked at the barricade, the drilled bolts, the fresh scratches on my concrete. Then I whispered, "Karen, you just handed me the case of a lifetime." After the arrests, things went quiet again. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from wind through spruce branches or river drift over stones. No, this was HOA quiet, calculated, coiled, waiting. Karen had taken a swing at my bridge and missed. People like her don't retreat after one mistake. They double down, triple down, and eventually implode under their own arrogance. So instead of waiting for the next blow, I decided to give her something to swing at. A decoy, a lure, a big, stupid, obvious, irresistible piece of bait she could not help but attack. A fake bridge, not a real structure, not even remotely convincing to a sane human. Just convincing enough to fool an HOA drunk on its own self-importance. I called two old contractor buddies from my engineering days, men who appreciated a good joke and hated bureaucratic nonsense almost as much as I did. "You want us to build what?" one of them asked. "Not build," I corrected. "Assemble. Think of it as an art installation." They laughed. "Now you're speaking our language." We bought hollow PVC pipes, leftover 2x4 lumber, 3 plastic barrels, fluorescent orange tape, rebar scraps, a gallon of concrete-colored paint, and within 6 hours, we created the most ridiculous bridge Montana had ever seen. A wobbly pink and gray contraption that sagged if you breathed too hard near it. We set it over a narrow section of the public buffer zone. Technically nobody's land, but close enough to the HOA trail that Karen would see it and lose her mind on sight. We even added a sign, freshly laminated, Site of Proposed Bridge Access, Project Under Review, Permit Pending, Montana Civil Route Division. The permit number was something I invented on the spot. Number RN00FK. My contractor buddies nearly passed out laughing. "This is gonna hook her so fast, she won't know she swallowed the bait," one said. "That's the plan," I replied. We left the whole thing standing like a monument to stupidity. And then we waited. We didn't wait long. 4 days later, at exactly 9:12 a.m., 2 sheriff's deputies knocked on my door. "Mr. Kane," one said, already looking exhausted, "we received a complaint from Riverside Tranquility HOA that you've begun unauthorized construction of a second bridge." I gave him my most innocent look. "A second bridge? Where?" "The HOA says you built a structure downstream." "Oh," I said, "you mean the exhibit." He blinked. "The what?" "The exhibit. An artistic commentary on the illusion of shared jurisdiction in rural Montana, built with no foundations, no footings, and no structural intent whatsoever." Both deputies stared at me for a long second. Then the younger one asked, "So, it's not a bridge?" "As real as their land claims," I replied. The older deputy coughed to hide a laugh. "Well," he said, "nothing illegal here. They'll have to take it up with the county's art commission, I guess." They left shaking their heads, but I knew Karen wasn't done. The next morning, another envelope arrived, HOA letterhead, dripping with indignation. "Cease and desist, order illegal structural activity adjacent to HOA property. You are hereby instructed to remove the unauthorized access platform and cease all construction immediately." I could barely finish reading it. I handed it to Mitchell, who nearly fell out of his chair laughing. "We'll respond," he said, "formally, thoroughly, and with the full weight of your environmental report attached." And we did. We sent them a letter titled, "Regarding the artistic structure mistaken for infrastructure." Inside, we included photos showing PVC pipes and plastic barrels, proof the site wasn't on HOA land, documentation of riparian violations on their side, the environmental report stating that my bridge was beneficial to wildlife. The next part, well, I couldn't have planned it better if I tried. 3 days later, a reporter from the regional newspaper called. Someone inside the HOA had leaked the entire complaint thread. The story hit the Sunday edition, and it spread fast. Reddit grabbed it, then Facebook, then TikTok. Then some college kid made a meme comparing Karen to a medieval warlord besieging a playground toy. Within 48 hours, the HOA's Google listing was renamed Riverside Tranquility, Guardians of Imaginary Infrastructure. I didn't change it, but I enjoyed it. Suddenly, neighbors who'd never spoken to me before were waving from their porches, laughing, shaking their heads. "That you?" one shouted from across the river. "The guy with the art bridge?" I raised my coffee mug. Guilty. But beneath all the humor, all the memes, all the sarcastic articles, something else was happening. Karen was becoming cornered, embarrassed, humiliated, increasingly unstable. And people like her don't collapse gracefully. They lash out. And when they do, that's when they make their biggest mistakes. The kind of mistakes you win lawsuits with. The fallout from the PVC bridge war spread faster than spring runoff. HOA members were furious, not at me, but at Karen. Meetings turned hostile, memos leaked, rumors spread. Some residents even started a petition to remove her, though nobody wanted to be the first signature on it. Fear still lived there, but fear makes people predictable, and predictable people make dangerous decisions. 4 days after the meme storm peaked, I got a knock on my door. Not deputies, not neighbors, a courier. He handed me a thick envelope stamped with a seal meant to look official. Except he didn't realize I had spent 40 years reading actual official documents. And this was not one. Inside was a formal notice of boundary violation from the county engineering office. Or so it claimed. It included A revised survey overlay showing my bridge crossing into HOA land. A safety condemnation recommendation signed by an engineer. An urgent notice demanding my bridge be removed within 14 days. If the envelope were any thicker, it would have needed a spine. Mitchell arrived 40 minutes later, holding his own copy. He set it on my dining table and said one word. "Garrett." I looked up. "This is fiction," he said. "Bad fiction." We combed through it page by page. The problems jumped out instantly. 1. The engineer who signed it, Leonard Briggs. Same name from the fake safety closure memo. Mitchell tapped the page. "Check his license number." I looked it up on the state registry. Revoked 5 years ago. Reason? Submitting falsified soil tests on a highway expansion contract. I almost laughed. Karen hired a disgraced fraud to forge engineering letters? Mitchell folded his arms. She hired a disgraced fraud who isn't legally allowed to call himself an engineer. We kept going. 2. The logos were wrong, font slightly off. Spacing inconsistent. A county office doesn't use a pixelated seal. 3. The parcel numbers didn't exist. Mitchell checked a GIS lookup. They made up land parcels out of thin air. Not even thin air, I said. Stupid air. 4. The survey lines use the wrong datum set. You don't use an urban grid system on a rural topo map. Only amateurs or desperate people make that mistake. Mitchell sighed. This is criminal territory now. Multiple counts. He placed a hand on the stack. Garrett, get ready. She's about to do something even dumber. He was right, because that afternoon I received an email from the Department of Environmental Quality. A new complaint, filed anonymously but citing community concern, alleging water contamination, bridge-caused siltation, disruption of native wildlife, erosion due to private construction interference. It was a laundry list of scare words copied straight from environmental law blogs. But here's the thing. Claire's team had already documented the exact opposite. I forwarded everything to her. Her reply came back in minutes. I'll write a formal counter-report. Also, this level of false reporting can carry its own penalties. Penalties. That word felt good. But the real showstopper came the next morning. The survey crew arrived. 2 older men in heavy jackets, GPS rigs strapped to their packs. The leader looked familiar. Milton Hughes, I said. He grinned. You didn't tell me you were this Garrett Kane. Milton had been one of my professors decades ago, one of the men who taught me load distribution and soil density long before HOAS were even words in my vocabulary. You're the one who helped me file the original topo, I said. Still got a copy, he replied, and it still matches the county archive. He and his partner, Wayne, a retired state boundary specialist, spent the whole day scanning every square foot from my property line to the HOA's edge, every coordinate, every marker, every historical overlay. By sundown, they had their result. Milton held up his tablet. Garrett, your bridge is 100% on your land, no overlap, not even an inch. Wayne chimed in. And the HOA land Karen keeps referencing, it's not even registered to them, at all. It's a natural easement, unclaimed buffer. They tried to assert control over something they don't own. Mitchell arrived just as we were packing up. Milton looked at him. You're the lawyer, right? Tell your friend here something for me. Go ahead, Mitchell said. Milton tapped the forged survey in the earlier packet. They not only used the wrong datum set, they used the wrong decade of maps. Mitchell raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning, Milton said. They didn't even bother forging it well. This is amateur hour fraud. We all stood there for a moment, me, Mitchell, Milton, Wayne, with the icy Montana wind blowing off the river. 4 grown men, realizing the full stupidity of one HOA president. Mitchell clapped his gloves together. Well, he said, this settles phase 1. What's phase 2? I asked. He smiled. Criminal filings. I looked back at my bridge, the same bridge Karen had tried to condemn, block, sabotage, and seize. Sunlight caught its concrete railings. The river whispered under it like nothing had happened. I took a long breath. I guess Karen really thought she could out-engineer an engineer. Oh, she thought much worse, Mitchell said. She thought nobody would check her work. He picked up the packet of forged documents. Well, tomorrow morning, a judge is going to check it. The courtroom felt warmer than I expected, not because of the temperature, but because of the people. Every pew was filled. Some faces were curious, some anxious, some entertained. A few reporters sat in the back row with notebooks ready, like they knew history was about to be made. Karen sat across the room at the defense table, chin lifted, blazer crisp, eyes hardened. Her lawyer looked far less confident, as if he knew the ship had a hole in it, but couldn't find the bucket. Mitchell leaned toward me. "You ready?" "I've been ready since the day they chained my bridge." When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Mitchell began his opening, measured, calm, and sharp enough to cut steel. He explained that this wasn't a simple property disagreement, but a deliberate campaign of fraud, harassment, forgery, trespass, and sabotage, engineered and executed by the Riverside Tranquility HOA under the direction of its president, Karen Brooks. He mentioned forged engineering letters, fabricated maps, illegal safety notices, false environmental complaints, and, his words lingered, a coordinated attempt to dismantle a structurally sound bridge on private land. Karen stiffened. Her lawyer shifted in his seat. When their side responded, it was with brittle confidence. The HOA's attorney insisted everything had been done in the interest of community safety, that they believed the bridge unsafe, unlawful, environmentally harmful. It might have sounded convincing if you'd never seen what they'd actually done. Karen couldn't help herself. She leaned into her microphone and added, "We only acted responsibly. We never damaged anything. We never touched his bridge." Mitchell smiled the way a hunter smiles when the deer steps into the clearing. He approached the witness stand. "Mrs. Brooks, to confirm, you are stating you never instructed anyone to physically interfere with Mr. Kane's bridge?" She straightened. "Absolutely not. Never." Mitchell nodded, as though he appreciated her confidence. Then he looked up at the judge. "Your Honor, may we dim the lights?" The courtroom darkened. Mitchell tapped his keyboard, and a video flickered to life on the projector. There, for everyone to see, were two men in reflective vests at the base of my bridge, one loosening bolts, the other drilling into the guardrail. My voice echoed in the room, calm and steady as I'd filmed it. And then came the soundbite that froze the air. "She paid us to do it. Cash. She said the bridge was illegal." Karen jerked forward in her seat. Mitchell paused the video at the perfect frame, both workers clearly visible. "Mrs. Brooks," he said quietly, "would you like to correct your answer?" The room buzzed with whispers. Karen's lawyer reached for her arm, but she pulled away. I don't know those men," she stammered. Mitchell didn't argue. He didn't need to. He simply lifted a clear plastic evidence bag containing a phone the deputies had seized. "Your Honor, these are the text messages recovered from one of the workers." He read them aloud, each word a hammer striking the coffin closed. "Is it done yet? Make sure you remove the main support bolts so the structure fails completely. Cash is in the usual spot. Don't let him see anything. Do it before sunrise. If the sheriff asks, say it's HOA property. Stick to that." Karen sagged in her chair as the courtroom gasped. Her lawyer closed his eyes, shoulders sinking. Even the judge let out a long, controlled breath. Mitchell wasn't done. He moved to the forged engineering reports, the ones signed by Engineer Leonard Briggs. "Your Honor, Mr. Briggs' license was revoked 5 years ago. He is not legally allowed to sign engineering documents, yet these letters were used by the HOA to condemn Mr. Kane's bridge." Karen tried again to interject, but her lawyer whispered urgently, "Stop talking." She didn't. "That's not my fault. He told me—" Mitchell cut her off with perfect timing. "So, you admit contacting Mr. Briggs for engineering work?" Her mouth snapped shut. The judge looked exhausted already. Next came the environmental testimony. Claire stepped forward with her calm, scientific certainty and systematically dismantled the HOA's complaints. She explained that my bridge created beneficial microhabitats, that fish used its shaded currents as rest zones, and that the real ecological damage came from the HOA's illegal clearing of vegetation downstream. She ended with a line that echoed through the room. If this HOA had succeeded in removing that bridge, the river would be worse for it, not better. By then, Karen's lawyer wasn't even taking notes anymore. He just stared at the table in front of him, as if hoping a sinkhole would open and swallow him whole. At last, all testimony concluded. The judge folded his hands and stared long and hard at Karen. In all my years on the bench, I have never seen an HOA act with this level of deceit. You falsified documents. You interfered with private infrastructure. You endangered a homeowner. And you attempted to manipulate government agencies using fabricated evidence. He issued the ruling. The HOA would pay $280,000 in damages, fees, and restitution. Karen personally owed $75,000 in fines. She was banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. The fraudulent engineer and 2 HOA board members would face criminal investigation. The boundary survey was declared final. My bridge was fully, unquestionably, legally on my land. And then he looked at me. Mr. Kane, this court grants you permanent injunctive protection. The HOA may not interfere with your property again in any manner. This matter is closed. I nodded. No smile, no celebration, just quiet, steady relief. Justice, I've learned, doesn't shout. It stands upright, speaks plainly, and lets the truth do the heavy lifting. And that day, truth buried the HOA. Snow began falling the week after the verdict, soft at first, drifting slowly through the treetops, then thickening into that kind of heavy Montana snowfall that blankets the world in quiet. The valley looked peaceful again, peaceful in a way it hadn't felt for months. My bridge stood exactly where it always had, strong as the day we poured the concrete, glistening under a thin sheet of early winter ice. No chains, no barricades, no cameras, no drill marks from desperate midnight sabotage, just a bridge, my bridge, leading to my home. I walked out to it that morning, coffee steaming in the cold, the air sharp enough to wake every part of the soul. The river rolled quietly under the forming ice crust, slow, steady, unchanged by all the noise humans had tried to throw at it. Funny thing about nature, it doesn't care about HOA drama, it just keeps moving. I leaned on the railing, listening to the water whisper beneath the stone. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't listening for trouble. I was just listening. Behind me, the crunch of footsteps in the snow made me turn. A pair of hikers came down the public trail, bundled in thick jackets, trekking poles tapping the frozen ground. As they drew closer, one slowed, squinted, then grinned. "Wait, are you that guy?" I raised an eyebrow. "Which guy?" "The bridge guy, the HOA war guy. Saw it all in the paper. Man, that was wild." I gave a small laugh. "Yeah, I guess that was me." He gave me a thumbs up before jogging to catch up with his partner. As they disappeared along the river trail, I realized something strange. People weren't avoiding me anymore. They weren't afraid of Karen's gossip, her threats, her letters. The spell she held over Riverside Tranquility was broken. Fear only works when people believe you have power, and Karen had none left. Mitchell called that afternoon to inform me that 2 HOA board members had resigned. Another was cooperating with investigators, and rumor had it Karen had sold her house at a loss and left town, headed west to stay with a sister in Oregon. I didn't celebrate. I didn't wish her harm. I just felt finished. Some battles aren't about revenge. They're about setting things right and letting the dust settle. And settling is exactly what the town began to do. A week later, the county posted an official notice online clarifying that all unplatted buffer zones, including the one Karen tried to claim, were legally off limits to HOAs. Quietly, almost without fanfare, my bridge became the reference point for future boundary surveys along the Black Row River. A landmark, a line in the sand, something that wasn't moving no matter how hard someone pushed it. I figured that deserved a marker. So, on a cold, bright morning, I mixed a batch of concrete in a wheelbarrow, hauled it to the bridge entrance, and set a post. When the base hardened, I bolted a solid steel-framed sign onto it, simple, clean, nothing fancy. It read, "This bridge is built on private land. Showa does not pass." Below that, on a small bronze plate I ordered from a local craftsman, I added, "Dedicated to peaceful water, quiet mornings, and fish who mind their own business." A little humor for the next hiker who stopped to read it. As I tightened the final bolt, another neighbor from across the valley passed by on the trail. He paused, admired the sign, and let out a quiet chuckle. "Well, that ought to settle it," he said. "It better," I answered. He shook his head. "Crazy what they tried to do to you." I didn't respond. because there was nothing left to say. When he was gone, I walked back onto the bridge, boots crunching softly on the frost. Snow had begun falling again, big flakes drifting down, like someone was trying to tuck the world under a blanket. I stood there for a long while, thinking about everything that had happened, the forged maps, the fake engineer, the sabotage, the lies, the court, the verdict. And somehow, standing there with snowflakes melting in my beard, none of it felt heavy anymore. The river kept moving, the mountains kept watching, the land was still mine, and not just because a judge had said so, because I fought for it, because I refused to be bullied off what I built, because some things in life are worth more than convenience, worth more than quiet, worth more than avoiding trouble. Some things are worth defending. My bridge was one of them. My home was another. That night, I grilled a steak, poured a glass of the apology whiskey one of the former HOA board members had mailed me. No note, just the bottle, and sat on my porch while the snowfall thickened around the valley. The bridge was just visible through the dark, a quiet silhouette against the white, solid, untouched, exactly where it belonged. And as the snow settled on the rails and the river whispered under the ice, I realized something. The war was over. The river had its calm back, and so did I.